Joining me now to discuss this all is Republican Arkansas State Senator Bart Hester. He is the sponsor of the state's religious freedom bill. Senator, thanks for joining us. I had thought that Governor Hutchinson had said he would sign your bill. What's your reaction to his saying it needs to now be changed to narrow it to more closely match the federal law?
Well, I think the reaction is it's not any different than the governor's handled all legislation that comes to his desk. He's very pragmatic. He's a very popular governor because he is pragmatic and fair. He's looked at this bill from all directions. He thinks there needs to be a couple amendments, and I'm open to considering those.
Let's talk about what this bill would do. If there is a conservative Christian florist, would it allow that florist to deny providing services to a gay couple who wants flowers at their wedding?
Well, I think that's two different questions to me. I think it does not allow for discrimination in any way, and it does not allow for a florist to discriminate against a gay couple looking for flowers. Now, what I think it does allow is for a florist that has a strongly held religious belief to be able to hold that belief close and not participate in the message of a homosexual wedding or ceremony. I think the First Amendment is very close to all of our hearts in America, and it's part of the cornerstones of who we are.
See, this is what I don't understand with supporters of this type of legislation. Would it allow the florist to not give flowers to the same-sex couple or not? You're saying almost two things. You're saying that there's no discrimination, but the Christian conservative doesn't have to participate in a ceremony they find objectionable. It's just one or the other. I'm just trying to figure out what it does. I'm not judging the legislation.
Sure. No, I think, to be clear, it does not allow someone to discriminate, and I think they should absolutely serve a homosexual couple. It also lets them hold their personal religious beliefs close on a message, and that message would be they don't support a homosexual wedding. Again, I wouldn't ask a Nazi to, I guess I wouldn't ask a Jewish baker to put a Nazi swastika on a cake. That wouldn't be fair either.
But how are they going to stay true to their conservative Christian beliefs and also not discriminate? This is what I don't get here. Are you saying that they can hold true and not participate in an event that they don't find holy, that they think is objectionable or sinful? Or are you saying that they have to? I'm confused.
Well, it's not a confusing issue at all. The First Amendment is not confusing. We have the right to freedom of speech. We have the right to hold our strongly held religious beliefs close to us. I think there is a difference in serving someone. I don't think there's any portion of that the government doesn't have a compelling interest to have businesses serve individuals. They cannot force that individual to participate in a ceremony that they don't believe in.
But so you're saying that the florists would have to provide flowers, for example, or caterers would have to provide food, but a wedding photographer who objects to same-sex marriage wouldn't have to participate in that? It's about the participation in the ceremony as opposed to the providing of services?
That's right. It's about the participation in the message. And someone doesn't have to participate in the message of something if they don't want. And the Supreme Court has said a message can be an action. For instance, an unpopular thing is burning the American flag, which makes me ill. But that is an action that we have the right to do in America through free speech. There can be another unpopular decision for a Christian baker to not want to participate in the ceremony of a gay wedding. But I assure you, this bill does nothing to promote or take away discrimination.
Is providing the cake participating in the message? That's the point. I think to many conservative Christians, it is, right?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll tell you, that's for the individual to decide for themselves.
So it would allow for them to discriminate. That's what you're saying. It would allow, if they feel that their participation in the ceremony, by providing pizza, by providing catering, by providing flowers, photographs, cake, whatever, that is participating in the message, then they could refrain and refuse to serve the same-sex couple.
I think you're right. I think they would not have to perform a message that they don't agree with through the freedom of speech. There's so many other issues that you can go along with. What if somebody told a Christian radio station they had to advertise with companies that they opposed? I don't think that's fair or right either.
All right, but my point is that your law would allow... See, the thing is, there are two competing interests here, right? There is the right of people to
Sure.
follow their faith in this country, and there's also the right of people to not be discriminated against. And they are coming at a head here to a degree.
I agree.
And I feel like people who are supporting this law are kind of fudging whether or not standing up for the Christian conservatives allows them to discriminate against same-sex couples in a ceremony or an event that they don't sanction. It would permit discrimination, is what you're
Sure.
saying, in the name of
No,
their religious rights.
I disagree. It says they cannot discriminate against an individual. They can discriminate against a message that they don't feel comfortable with their strongly held religious belief. Hey, there's a reason this is the First Amendment, to be able to protect our right to religion. And this is all religions. People that I wouldn't ask an atheist bakery to do a with this Easter weekend coming. I wouldn't ask an atheist bakery to put you know, Jesus has risen on a cake if he didn't comfortable with that. He has
So
a
you're
strongly
you would
held
be, you would be
religious or
totally fine.
anti-religious belief.
So you would be totally fine with, let's say, a conservative Muslim baker saying there is no way we're ever going to provide cakes for Christians or Jews for anything having to do with a Christian or Jewish event because we think that that is forbidden. That's okay with you under this law?
Well, under this law, we have the right to the First Amendment, a right to freedom of speech, and I believe in the First Amendment.
All right. State Senator Bart Hester, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.